Hello and good day, Mike Adcock here with an update on Tropical Storm Flossie in the Central Pacific. This brief is based on the 12 Zulu Advisory Package dated 28 July 2013. Taking a look at Tropical Storm Flossie, the 12 Zulu position from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center is 965 kilometers east of Hilo, Hawaii. Winds have increased slightly up to 55 knots, gusting to 65. It continues moving off to the west at 17 knots, and our pressure's down to 996 hectopascal. I do have some tropical advisories to issue to advise you of. Tropical storm warnings for Hawaii and Maui counties, and a tropical storm watch is in effect for Oahu. Taking a look at some of those hazards being reported by the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. With these warnings and watches, winds are going to be a concern. Tropical storm force winds mainly for the Big Island and Maui Monday morning, and possibly affecting Oahu Monday night. The big story really is going to be rainfall. Expecting 6 to 10 inches, isolated up to 15 inches, especially on the windward side of the Big Island and Maui County. And that's going to start early Monday morning for Hawaii County, Monday afternoon for Oahu County. And then for Oahu, Monday night, expect 4 to 8 inches possible there, isolated up to 1 foot, again mainly on the windward side of the island. This rainfall could lead to some life-threatening flash floods and mudslides, especially up in the mountains. On the east shores, surf will also be a concern. Large surf there, starting as early as this afternoon and continuing through Monday and Tuesday, and that could lead to some coastal road closures. Alright, our National Weather Service surface analysis shows Flossie there to the east of the Hawaiian Islands, large area of high pressure to the north, and that's really been keeping Flossie on this westward path. That should continue. You can see the subtropical ridge very well in place there, so really no change in the forward progress. Here is the Central Pacific Hurricane Center track on Flossie. This was from 9 Zulu. You can see there the islands in blue are the tropical storm warnings. Yellow is the tropical storm watch. And just continuing in the westward fashion there, still tropical storm force by the time it reaches Oahu Monday night. Considering the distance, may not see some of the tropical storm force winds unless the track starts to deviate. By the time it continues westward on Tuesday, you should start seeing that weakening on as a depression. Here's our model guidance for the track. This is from 6 Zulu, pretty much continuing a westward path. Depending on which track it takes, chances are it's going to affect the islands in some fashion or another. The general consensus is it's going to be on the south end of this envelope, but of course it could, it doesn't take much for it to edge up north. There are some signs of evidence that it could, so thus the tropical storm watch for Oahu. The good news is the intensity guidance continues to show weakening through the rest of the forecast period, and that actually, you could see the official forecast right in here. That actually might it may weaken a little bit quicker than that. We'll have to watch that. The concern right now is, okay, great, Flossie's continuing to move westward. The ridge that's been to the northeast of the system, it's been keeping it up there. You're starting to see that becoming less of a factor, but now we're seeing a ridge off to the west of the Hawaiian Islands being more of a player. That's going to start increasing shear. Between that, some mediocre water temperatures, really expecting some weakening, at least in the near term. Should dissipate it by the end of the forecast period. In terms of longer range forecast, what ends up happening, a week or week and a half from now, we'll have to see how that plays out. But at least in the near term, should weaken out and dissipate by the time it moves through the Hawaiian Islands. Let's take a look at the Dvorak analyses. National Weather Service going with a 3.0 That's based on a 6/10 banding on log 10. JTWC going a little less. They're looking at a half wrap going, and that's leading us to a 2.5 for the final T. ADT, the advanced Dvorak technique, right now looking at 3.0 for the final T, 3.3 for the current intensity, which would lead to about 51 knots. And that's generally on point with what we are with the Central Pacific Hurricane Center is going with 55 knots. All right, let's take a look at our surface temperatures. Flossie is out in this area. Like I said, mediocre water temperature sitting at about 25 degrees Celsius. It's going to continue tracking off to the west. Water temperatures actually do slightly increase. Not anything too exciting. By the time it gets over Hawaii, that's when we're starting to see temperatures about 26 degrees or roughly 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So, but by that point, as we're getting toward the Hawaiian Islands and westward, where the temperatures start to warm back up and to favorable conditions, the wind shear is significantly a factor there. So, really going to be of no effect. And speaking of that, let's take a look at the 200 millibar analysis. Here's Flossie, just to the right of center of the image here. Do have a large area of high pressure to its east as well as to the southwest of the Hawaiian Islands. A lot of subsidence going on out ahead of it. You do have a lot of outflow affecting Flossie in the near term anyway, and you can see that at least on the terms of how much cirrus is being ejected from the system. The concern though is once it passes through the Hawaiian Islands and whatever land interaction that it does go through there, you have a significant amount of shear with the subtropical jet here. Looking at wind speeds, reaching about 70 knots here. It's really going to be impossible for Flossie to make it through that. And speaking of shear, this is our shear analysis and tendency. Near term, not too bad. Actually, shear is decreasing some, very, very negligible. But as it approaches the Hawaiian Islands, you can see shear just jumps off the roof, 50, 60 knots. So time is limited for Flossie. Of course, it does look like it's going to go through the Hawaiian Islands first, though. Speaking of that, let's take a look at the current conditions in Hilo. Still not really seeing the effects of Flossie. These clouds are not associated with Flossie whatsoever. Current temperature 22 Celsius, that would be 50 or 71 Fahrenheit. Winds are out of the west-southwest there, 7 miles per hour. Visibility is unrestricted, 10 miles there, dew point 67 Fahrenheit. And the pressure 1016 hectopascal or 30.01 inches. Take a look at their forecast. Do look for some increased low-level cloudiness over the next several hours. By 4Z tomorrow, that's when you're looking for those winds to really start cranking up. Right now, starting at 4Z, expecting northerly winds there, 20 knots gusting to 30 knots. Currently do have a tropical storm warning out for Hilo as well as the flash flood watch. Alright, on that note, this concludes today's update on Tropical Storm Flossie. You can follow along with the global tropical discussion at storm2k.org. Follow me on Twitter at Senior Pepper. I'll provide updates in between videos there. Of course, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day and take care.